Chapters 21 through 24 of the Book of the Acts of the Apostles, from the American Bible Union's New Testament. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapters 21 through 24 of the Book of the Acts of the Apostles. Chapter 21. And it came to pass that after we had torn ourselves from them and had put to sea, we came with a straight course to Coos, and the day following to Rhodes, and from thence to Patara. And finding a ship crossing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and put to sea. And bringing Cyprus in sight, and leaving it on the left hand, we sailed to Syria, and landed at Tyre, for there the ship was to unlade her burden. And having found out the disciples, we remained there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. And when we had completed the days, we departed and went our way, they all accompanying us, with wives and children, till we were out of the city, and we kneeled down on the beach and prayed. And having embraced one another, we went on board the ship, and they returned to their homes. And we, completing the voyage, came down from Tyre to Ptolemais, and having embraced the brethren, we remained with them 1 day. And on the morrow we departed, and came to Caesarea. And entering into the house of Philip the evangelist, being one of the 7, we abode with him. And this man had 4 daughters, virgins, who prophesied. And while we were remaining several days, there came down from Judea a certain prophet named Agabus. And coming to us, he took off Paul's girdle, and bound his own hands and feet, and said, "Thus says the Holy Spirit, so will the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man whose this girdle is, and will deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles." And when we heard these things, both we and they of that place besought him not to go up to Jerusalem. Then answered Paul, "What mean ye to weep and to break my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." And when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, "The will of the Lord be done." And after those days, having packed up our baggage, we went up to Jerusalem. There went with us also some of the disciples from Caesarea, bringing us to Mnason of Cyprus, an old disciple with whom we should lodge. And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. And on the following day Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. And having embraced them, he recounted particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles through his ministry. And they, hearing it, glorified the Lord. And they said to him, "Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are who believe, and they are all zealots for the law. And they were informed concerning thee, that thou teachest all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they should not circumcise their children, nor walk after the customs. What is it, therefore? A multitude must surely come together, for they will hear that thou hast come. Do therefore this that we say to thee. We have 4 men who have a vow on them. Take these with thee, and purify thyself with them, and bear the charges for them, that they may shave their heads. And all will know that those things of which they have been informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly, keeping the law. But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we wrote to them, deciding that they should observe no such thing, except that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from what is strangled, and from fornication." Then Paul took the men, and the next day, having purified himself with them, entered into the temple, announcing the completion of the days of the purification, until the offering was brought for each one of them. And as the 7 days were about to be completed, the Jews from Asia, having observed him in the temple, stirred up all the people, and laid hands on him, crying out, "Man of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all everywhere against the people, and the law, and this place. And further also he brought Greeks into the temple, and has polluted this holy place." For they had before seen with him in the city Trophimus the Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and laying hold of Paul, they dragged him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. And while they were seeking to kill him, a report came up to the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar, who immediately took with him soldiers and centurions, and ran down to them, and they, seeing the chief captain and the soldiers, left off beating Paul. Then the chief captain came near, and took hold of him, and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and inquired who he was, and what he had done. And some cried one thing, some another among the multitude, and not being able to know the certainty on account of the tumult, he commanded him to be led into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was, that he was borne by the soldiers on account of the violence of the people. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, "Away with him!" And as he was about to be led into the castle, Paul says to the chief captain, "May I speak to thee?" And he said, "Canst thou speak Greek? Art thou not then the Egyptian, who before these days made an uproar, and led out into the wilderness the 4,000 men of the assassins?" And Paul said, "I am a Jew of Tarsus, a citizen of no obscure city of Cilicia, and I beseech thee, suffer me to speak to the people." And he, having given him permission, Paul, standing on the stairs, beckoned with the hand to the people. And a great silence ensuing, he spoke to them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, Chapter 22.
Brethren and fathers, hear my defense, which I now make to you.
And hearing that he spoke to them in the Hebrew tongue, they kept the more silence. And he says,
I am a Jew, born indeed in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, taught at the feet of Gamaliel, according to the strictness of the law of the fathers, being zealous for God, as ye all are this day. And I persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. As also the high priest bears me witness, and all the eldership, from whom moreover I received letters to the brethren, and was journeying to Damascus, to bring also those who were there bound to Jerusalem, that they might be punished. And it came to pass that as I journeyed, and came near to Damascus, about midday, there suddenly flashed around me a great light out of heaven, and I fell to the ground, and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus the Nazarene, whom thou persecutest. And they who were with me beheld indeed the light, and were afraid. But the voice of him who spoke to me they heard not. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Arise, and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee concerning all things which it is appointed thee to do. And as I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand by those who were with me, I came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report from all the Jews who dwelt there, came to me, and standing by me said to me, Brother Saul, receive sight. And I in that very hour looked up upon him. And he said, The God of our fathers appointed thee to know his will, and to see the Just One, and to hear a voice out of his mouth. For thou shalt be a witness for him to all men of what thou hast seen, and didst hear. And now why tarriest thou? Arise, be immersed, and wash away thy sins, calling on his name. And it came to pass, when I had returned to Jerusalem, and as I was praying in the temple, that I was in a trance, and saw him saying to me, Make haste, and go forth quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they well know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue those who believe on thee. And when the blood of thy witness Stephen was shed, then I myself was standing by, and consenting, and keeping the garments of those who slew him. And he said to me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence to the Gentiles.
And they heard him unto this word, and then lifted up their voices, and said, Away with such a one from the earth! For it was not fit that he should live. And as they were crying out, and throwing up their garments, and casting dust into the air, the chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know for what charge they were thus crying out against him. And as they stretched him forth with the thongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by,
Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman, and uncondemned?
The centurion hearing it, he went and told the chief captain, saying, What art thou about to do? For this man is a Roman. And the chief captain came and said to him,
Tell me, art thou a Roman?
He said,
Yes.
And the chief captain answered,
For a great sum I obtained this freedom.
And Paul said,
But I was born free.
Immediately, therefore, they departed from him who were about to examine him. And the chief captain also was afraid, after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. On the morrow, wishing to know the certainty wherefore he was accused by the Jews, he released him, and commanded the chief priests and all the council to come together. And he brought Paul down, and set him before them. Chapter 23. And Paul, earnestly beholding the council, said,
Men, brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God unto this day.
And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him,
God will smite thee, thou whited wall. And dost thou sit to judge me according to the law, and command me to be smitten contrary to law?
And they that stood by said, Revilest thou God's high priest? And Paul said,
I knew not, brethren, that he is high priest, for it is written, Thou shalt not speak evil of a ruler of thy people.
And Paul, knowing that the one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, cried out in the council,
Men, brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. For the hope of the resurrection of the dead I am now judged.
And when he had said this, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but Pharisees acknowledge both. And there arose a great clamor, and the scribes of the party of the Pharisees arose, and contended, saying, We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit spoke to him, or an angel. And a great dissension arising, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should be pulled in pieces by them, commanded the soldiery to go down, and to take him by force from among them, and to bring him into the castle. And the night following, the Lord stood by him, and said, Be of good courage, for as thou didst fully testify the things concerning me at Jerusalem, so must thou testify also at Rome. And when it was day, the Jews banded together, and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. And they were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. And they came to the chief priests and the elders, and said,
We bound ourselves under a great curse, to taste nothing until we have slain Paul. Now therefore do ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down to you, as though ye would ascertain more exactly the matters concerning him, and we, before he comes near, are ready to kill him.
And the son of Paul's sister, hearing of their lying in wait, went and entered into the castle, and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him, and said,
Bring this young man to the chief captain, for he has something to tell him.
So he took him, and brought him to the chief captain, and said,
Paul, the prisoner, called me to him, and asked me to bring this young man to thee, as he has something to say to thee.
Then the chief captain took him by the hand, and went aside privately, and asked,
What is it thou hast to tell me?
And he said, The Jews agreed to desire thee that thou wouldst bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat more exactly concerning him. But do not thou yield to them. For of them more than 40 men are lying in wait for him, who bound themselves with an oath neither to eat nor to drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, looking for the promise from thee. The chief captain therefore dismissed the young man, having charged him to say to no one that thou didst show these things to me. And calling to him 2 or 3 of the centurions, he said,
Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen, at the 3rd hour of the night. and let them provide beasts, that they may set Paul thereon, and bring him safe to Felix the governor.
And he wrote a letter after this manner:
Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, sends greeting. This man was taken by the Jews, and was about to be killed by them. But I came upon them with the soldiery, and rescued him, having learned that he is a Roman. And wishing to know the crime for which they were accusing him, I brought him down into their council, whom I found to be accused concerning questions of their law, but having nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. And being informed that a plot was about to be laid against the man, I sent straightway to thee, having also commanded the accusers to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell.
The soldiers therefore, as was commanded them, took up Paul, and brought him by night to Antipatris. But on the morrow, leaving the horsemen to go with him, they returned to the castle, who, when they had entered into Caesarea, and delivered the letter to the governor, presented Paul also before him. And having read it, he asked of what province he was. And learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear thee fully, when thy accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in the praetorium of Herod. Chapter 24. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. And he having been called, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, Seeing that by thee we enjoy great quietness, and that very worthy deeds are done for this nation through thy providence, in every way and everywhere, we accept it, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. But not to hinder thee too long, I pray thee that thou wouldst hear us of thy clemency a few words. For we have found this man to be a pest, and exciting disturbance among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, who also attempted to profane the temple, whom we took, and desired to judge according to our law. But Lysias, the chief captain, came, and with great violence took him away out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come before thee, from whom thou canst thyself ascertain, by examination, concerning all these things whereof we accuse him. And the Jews also joined in assailing him, saying that these things were so. Then Paul, the governor having beckoned to him to speak, answered, Knowing that thou hast been for many years a judge for this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself, inasmuch as thou mayest know that there are not more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship, and neither in the temple did they find me disputing with any one, or causing a tumult of the people, nor in the synagogues, nor in the city, nor can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. But this I acknowledge to thee, that according to the way which they call a sect, so I worship the God of our fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and the prophets, having a hope toward God, which these themselves also look for, that there will be a resurrection both of the just and unjust. Therefore do I also myself strive to have always a conscience void of offense toward God and men. And after many years I came to bring alms to my nation, and offerings, amidst which they found me purified in the temple, not with a crowd, nor with tumult, but certain Jews from Asia caused it, who ought to be here before thee, and make accusation if they had aught against me. Or let these themselves say what crime they found in me while I stood before the council, except for this one voice that I cried, standing among them, Concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am judged by you this day. And Felix put them off, knowing the things concerning the way more accurately, saying, When Lysias the chief captain shall come down, I will fully inquire into your matters. And he commanded the centurion that he should be guarded, and should have indulgence, and to forbid none of his acquaintance to minister to him. And after certain days Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was a Jewess, and sent for Paul, and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. And as he reasoned of righteousness, temperance, and the judgment to come, Felix trembled and answered, Go thy way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I will call for thee. He hoped also that money would be given him by Paul, wherefore he sent for him the oftener, and conversed with him. But after 2 years Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and Felix, wishing to gain favor with the Jews, left Paul bound. The end of chapters 21 through 24 of the Book of the Acts of the Apostles, from the American Bible Union's New Testament. Recording by Mark Penfold.